Hello everyone, and welcome to our backyard. Today's video is all about the heat. Here in Texas, along the Gulf Coast, and actually most of Texas, has been under what's called an excessive heat warning for quite a few days now. And there are a lot of plants that thrive in the heat. So today's video is about those plants in my garden. And I'm not going to include plants that tolerate the heat, but these are truly plants that thrive. And I have a whole list of them here that I'm going to be going through today. And I'm going to put these plants in the description. So you can go up to the description and get the plants, and those, some of them that would be best if I put the botanical name, I'll put that also in the description. So you can go up there for the plants. All right, let's get started. These plants are in no particular order, but the first one I want to talk about is Cuphea, or cigar plant. And this plant thrives in the heat, humidity, full sun, and it just prolifically flowers. It is a pollinator magnet. Let's see if I can focus in here. And you can see the long tubular orange flowers are highly attractive to hummingbirds, but also to the pollinators. I have I think 4 Cuphea in the yard, and they are visited constantly. This variety is called David Verity, and I also have a smaller dwarf variety called Vermillionaire. But as you can see, this plant just flowers and flowers and flowers, and the hotter the better. And quite frankly, it doesn't stop flowering until frost. It is a wonderful plant to have in the garden. Pentas are also in this category of almost the hotter the better. Pentas just thrive during the heat of the summer, and they flower and flower and flower. I recommend that you continue to deadhead them, because when you do deadhead, it allows them to flower again more consistently. The wonderful thing about Pentas is they come in all different sizes and all different colors of blooms. So there should be a bloom out there that would fit in your garden. And in this summer heat, I consider it almost a must-have in the pollinator garden. A wonderful flowering shrub or bush is called the flame Acanthus. And this is a wonderful performer. It does well in the heat. Actually, the hotter the better. It will tolerate our clay soil and our rains, but it actually prefers drier conditions. And in a dry condition, if you have a dry soil and then water it, it produces a wonderful flush of blooms like most xeric type plants. But it gets pretty consistent water here, and it just flowers beautifully. Again, this is a pollinator magnet. The hotter the better is certainly Lantana. I've talked about Lantana, and in fact, I'm going to link a couple of the videos that I have up top, because Lantana is such a beautiful performer in the garden. So far, all of these plants that I have talked about are full sun. And this Lantana is a mounding Lantana that I think is particularly nice. It is in the Bloomify series, and they have quite a few different bloom colors. I would certainly look into it, because I think this Lantana is just gorgeous. a stellar performer in the heat is Firebush. And Firebush just flowers and flowers and flowers all throughout the summer. I have a couple of different types of Firebush, and I absolutely love this plant. I don't think there's a heat that bothers this plant. It doesn't have pests. It isn't attacked by anything. It just is a wonderful plant to have. I have Firebush all along my back fence and absolutely love how it performs. I couldn't have a heat-loving list without including Coneflower. And I love the sunniness and cheeriness. I planted this early spring, and it is just starting to flower. I have both Cheyenne Spirit and Powwow Berry Blend in the garden. Pollinators love Coneflower, and Coneflower loves the sun and the heat. A vine that thrives in the heat is our native coral honeysuckle. Ooh. Pollinators love the flowers, as you can see. And this vine just thrives. Doesn't tolerate, it just thrives. So those of you that are looking for vertical interest, definitely consider coral honeysuckle. We have ours trellised, and it grows up the trellis very easily. I've talked about the perennial John Fanick Phlox. In fact, I did in my prior video, the video prior to this one, and it does fantastic in the heat. I love the gorgeous bloom heads, and this should flower through midsummer. It's such a wonderful thing to have in the garden. It's pollinator attractor. It's got beautiful foliage. And it just doesn't have things that attack it. John Fanick Phlox is a perennial. This would be one to consider in the high heat garden. And of course, I need to include tropical hibiscus. Tropical hibiscus does extremely well in the heat. In fact, it prefers the heat. And for those of you considering hibiscus, I'm going to link a video up top where I talked about all the different types of hibiscus plants that you can get. Certainly the hardy hibiscus go down to zone 4 all the way up through all the zones. These are tropical hibiscus, and there's a certain type of tropical hibiscus that I recommend getting because they have less problems with pests. And some tropical hibiscus that I've had with specific leaf structures, I do have problems with pests, but not these. And they just flourish in the heat. And I couldn't leave out, I should say, Mandevilla. And I know most people probably pronounce it Mandevilla, but my nursery, fairly local to me, is owned by a Vietnamese family. And of course, Vietnam has French influences, and so they pronounce this plant Mandevilla, and that's how I started pronouncing it. So I apologize, but it's also known as Mandevilla, and this plant just loves the heat and humidity. There are also shade-loving plants that do so well in the heat and humidity. In fact, I feel like the hotter the better. They just seem to just thrive and grow and flourish. And the one you're looking at here is a shade caladium. I know there's some caladiums that can tolerate sun, but I have all of my caladiums in either shade or dappled shade / dappled sun. And I find that they do, even the sun caladiums do so well, and their colors are so bright, protecting them a little bit from our intense sun and heat down here. I like to show this caladium because I think it's such a beautiful color. And I got this $1.99 bedding plant that I planted in a pot, and I think it's just gorgeous. Gives you kind of a size of the leaves. Caladiums do have nice, beautiful, large leaves. There are so many different color choices to choose from with caladiums that I think there's almost something for everyone. And here is one I'm just getting started. And as you can see, it's just starting to push up. Again, the hotter the better for caladiums. Shrimp plants are related to the flame Acanthus that I showed you earlier in the video, and they also thrive in the heat. I do want to point out that I do have my shrimp plants in partial shade, and they are thriving in the partial shade. Very, very unique type flowers. And of course, in the shade garden, Coleus thrive in our heat and humidity. And they actually grow larger than the stated amounts. There are so many different types of Coleus and so many different colors. I think this is a plant that anyone can find something that they love. It is a tropical, so they are annuals unless you protect them and bring them inside. But because I can't grow in this heat and humidity and wet soil, I can't grow well hostas and coral bells or heuchera. But the wonderfulness of these plants, Coleus just fits the bill in a shade garden with high heat and humidity. I do have most of my Coleus planted in the ground, but I also have some in pots, and they do so well. And certainly an honorable mention in the shade garden in the heat is sweet potato vine. You got to make sure though that you give your sweet potato vine plenty of water. There are 2 annuals on this list that I've grown from seed now, and the first one is Tithonia, or Mexican sunflower, and it has these neon orange flowers. They are covered in butterflies and pollinators all day long. But what I've noticed with this plant is also the hotter, the better. It is a sunny and cheery flower. And finally, I have to include our Cardinal Climber vine. It has had more flowers than leaves, which is very unusual for us. The weather has been really weird this year to where it has flowered so early, and it's just continued to flower for us. So I hope it doesn't impact hummingbird migration in August and September, because it is just prolifically flowering right now. But we also grow these from seed, and I'm going to link up top a playlist of our Cardinal Climber so you can see how that performs from seed down here. Loves the heat and humidity. Back where I started, in my garden. So what would you include on your list that you have in your yard that performs extremely well in the heat? I've included humidity because I garden in zone 9A along the Texas Gulf Coast, and we have high humidity most of the summer here in the Houston area, in the greater metro area. So I'm curious what thrives in the heat in your location. This video wasn't about what tolerates the heat, because I've got lots of plants in my yard that are doing just fine in the heat, but the ones I included are the ones that just thrive in the heat. So I wanted to do that for you to consider what you could plant in your garden potentially for your midsummer blahs that a lot of gardens experience. These plants won't have those blahs. All right. Well, for those of you that are in this heat, stay cool, stay safe. But wherever you are, I hope you can get into your gardens today. And I hope you have just a wonderful day. Thanks for joining me.